Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for another one of your questions about work. And this is an important variation on a question we've answered here before. For those of you who are here for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future of work. And Ryan and I met collaborating on some personal work in political outreach and engagement. Ryan is an architectural designer, still in Portland?
Still in Portland,
Still in
yes.
Portland. Good. I didn't want to get that wrong. And so go and ask your question. And I'd love to hear any context you have behind it. And then we can riff a little bit. And thank you
Great,
for
thanks.
doing this.
First, thanks for having me on. It's great to
Oh,
join
no,
you.
it's great.
I caught one of your conversations with Mia a few weeks ago, and you were talking about how to succeed in an entry-level position, and it made me think of my own place in my career. So I have some work experience. I started a new job, and it's not my first. What should I know?
Yeah. So I think that it's amazing to know that that context is totally different. And the reason the context is different in my mind is because of what others' expectations are. So you come in and you know stuff. And so to me, the first question is, why did they hire me? Like, it's very different when you're joining and it's one of your first jobs. Like, well, sure, but there could have been other people and they gave me a shot and I'm just going to prove myself. But in a more experienced role, there's usually a specific reason why they've chosen you. And it's often something people don't ask when they get the job, but you fit in for others in your workplace, for the person who oversees you, for others, into a context of what's happening right now. And then, you had been raising this before we hit the go live button, which is oftentimes it's because there's some crisis that they believe you are in a unique position to help them address. They have some pronounced need. And so if you know what that is and at least can make noises about it, then what that does is it adapts the general advice we've talked about in the past, or not advice, but the general thinking on what you might do, of just using. You do have a honeymoon period in the beginning, which is your time to learn. Reach out to people individually, read all the documents, immerse yourself in whatever tools they use, go to the company events that you might not otherwise go to. But as a more experienced person, all with a bent toward, I understand there's a challenge with X. And also the honeymoon period might not be quite as long because they're really expecting you to get going. So that to me is kind of one major thing. And then, the second piece that happens when your experiences are often curious about your past. And so just bringing up, well, what I've seen before is, without overdoing it, it's a timing and dosage thing of like looking to bring in. I mean, look, you've got some of your current or maybe past projects behind you right there. It's not just, you're always bringing who you are as a human being, but the more experienced you are, the more you're also bringing your prior professional experience and just delivering on some of the value for that without being the annoying person in the meeting who's like, well, when I was at Microsoft, what we used to do is whatever the thing is. I don't know. So I'm curious, as you're like actually living this experience, how that lands with you.
What you just said makes me think of an experience I had in grad school. I believe it was the first day during orientation, and we were told as incoming architecture students for grad school, forget everything you know. And not that we should actually forget everything you know, but leave your good habits and your bad habits and your predispositions behind and do things our way for this 2 years. And I think that could definitely apply to starting an intermediate position in the workforce as well. Like, you want to be able to imbue yourself with the culture of the company.
Yeah. And one thing that I just point out on that, I think that's totally true, is different workplaces think of themselves differently in terms of how much they value their own distinctive way. So for example, at Bloomberg, there are many very Bloomberg ways of doing things. So if you show up and you're like, well, this is how I always used to do it, it's like, I'm sorry, the physics on this planet just operate differently than what you're used to. Whereas there are plenty of other places where it's all, let's take the best practices of everything. Not that every place doesn't try to do both, but knowing, reading the culture, especially reading it, when it's your first job or an early job, you're really just absorbing workplace culture generally. What is this store like? What is this office like? What is this job site like? Whereas once you've been in multiple places, you're then seeing the differences between them. And it's sort of like, I grew up on the Upper West Side of New York, and it's depending where somebody's from, I'll be like, well, I'm from New York, or I'm from 68th between Columbus and Central Park West. And the difference is just how close somebody is to it. You can start to perceive finer degrees of difference. And so one way of putting it is that the expectation for your awareness of what that workplace is all about goes up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And another thing is, and I'm curious what your experience of this, in my industry, in architecture, there's sort of a hierarchy with how your roles progress through your career. So you have first year associates kind of work on this set of tasks, and your second year associates work on another set of tasks up until licensure. And once you achieve licensure, you sort of have an expectation to be project manager and interfacing with consultants. Do you find the same hierarchy in your industry or other
It
industries?
depends a lot. So I would call that call it like consistent role expectations across different workplaces. So
Yes.
in law, for example, very consistent. In venture capital, it happens to a degree. In startups, a lot less. Like whenever people are like, well, for a director, I would assume you can blank. Yeah, being a director at a 20-person company versus a 20,000-person company is often very different, and these roles morph. And so, but what it can do is you can come in, and I think a very powerful concept that people underuse is just the concept of defaults. Is you come in not saying this is exactly what a second year associate should do, because to some extent these things are a little bit not totally arbitrary, but there's a judgment call on the boundaries of what's included. So just being able to say, like, my understanding of what I've seen before is that somebody who has 4 or 5 years of experience is capable of doing this and not quite that, and focused on this. Does that sound right to you? Just checking in with people and kind of narrating it, especially in the beginning. Nobody's going to be like, he doesn't know. So that's kind of how I think about it. But that concept of defaults. And so I kind of think about knowing why you were brought in, you know, kind of where the fires were burning, but also why you specifically, because they really chose you. Acclimatizing, as you said, but in a way that is suited to the nature of the specific organization and knowing its differences, but then also just walking in with defaults and using those and just kind of trying to use your spidey sense to intuit when I should bring it up and when I shouldn't. That's the kind of heightened level of awareness that I think comes in when you're an experienced hire.
That makes total sense, Roy.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining. And we love, by the way, for folks out there, we love when somebody pays attention and it's like, I have a follow-up question. We get a lot of our questions from people engaging just like this. Ryan, when it's somebody who I've like had a chance to collaborate with before and hope to again, it's extra special. And so just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Roy. And I look forward to collaborating with you again sometime.
To be continued. All right. Thank you.